Hilmon Sorey is co-founder and CoachCRM sales coaching software for managers. Co-founder of ClozeLoop, a management consulting firm based in New York, Houston, Silicon Valley, and Johannesburg. And he's a partner in 212 Angels as a seed stage venture capital firm, member of the Forbes Business Council, obviously, and author of 8 top-selling books on sales, sales management, and coaching. He has coached and consulted over 500 fast growth companies that range from early stage startups to companies such as Salesforce, Box, SurveyMonkey, and Build.com, totaling over $640 billion in valuation and market cap. In addition, Hilmon is an award-winning trainer to more than 15,000 salespeople and over 5,000 senior executives. He hosts 2 top-performing podcasts and is a sought-after speaker around the globe. In fact, he's in Barcelona right now. In fact, I'm throwing that in. That's actually in his intro. So he's at the EU Startup Summit in Barcelona right now, which is super groovy. Hilmon has spent the last 25 years in Silicon Valley with 3 successful exits. And he's excited to be here today to let you know in on his secret about what Silicon Valley startups know that the rest don't. And I am super excited to have him sharing his knowledge with us and about a part of the world that I want to know more about, like what happens in Silicon Valley. So with that, I am complete, and Hilmon, take it from here.
I'm still trying to figure out what happens in Silicon Valley myself. Thank you for an introduction that rivals one I would get from my mother, Anastasia. I want to just take you with me wherever I go. That was fantastic. I have to say how much I deeply appreciate the format of this meeting. Seldom does one get a chance when you're on this side of the camera to actually get introduced to everyone who is going to be attending the meeting. So I appreciate that. And it's been delightful to learn about tiger sharks and drones and pitch freaks and San Francisco history and alliteration and everything else. I think I've learned more in the last half hour than I have in the last half of the month. But good day wherever you are in the world, Golden Gate Breakfast Club. Really nice to meet you all. In the spirit of the Tinker Toys, I grew up on Lincoln Logs, which I did not know were actually made of redwood. And they stopped making them because they didn't want people tearing down more redwood forests. So those that exist on eBay, I went to go buy them for my son. I want to say he's 12 now. So this was probably 6 or 7 years ago. They were something like $600 on eBay. So if you've got any of those lying around, they're a collector's item. Hold on to them. But if in the spirit of the Wayback Machine, just to give you a little insight as to why I do what I do, I just want to take you back. And if you can imagine, I'm sitting in this fishbowl of an office awaiting my turn. And it's called a fishbowl because that's my office is positioned between sales team, marketing team, and literally every wall is glass. And I'm 27 years old. I'm the chief revenue officer of a fast-growing web security firm in Silicon Valley. Back then I had a lot more hair, but a lot less experience. About 25 minutes ago, 3 people have walked into the office. They've kind of whisked through directly to a conference room, looking very VC oriented with vests and buttoned up shirts and, names in the corner. And they go sit down looking a little dour. And I've got this feeling that I assume is much like the feeling that someone who's on trial has as they're scanning the jury for faces to kind of determine what their fate's going to be. My portion of this presentation, this board presentation to this VC group is only going to be about 10 minutes. And I've memorized all of my conversion metrics for sales. I've memorized my team performance. I know every acronym. I know all of these paths to scale and things that I'm supposed to know as a CRO of this Silicon Valley startup. And I see nods of validation from these 3 as I'm talking. They're kind of nodding their heads and making some notes on their legal pads and things like this. And I feel like I've got this nailed. I get to the end of my presentation and I say, we're very confident that we'll make a tremendous addition to your portfolio. And, I breathe a sigh of relief. I'm like, okay, I got through it. I've spent probably 18-hour days for the last 32 to 34 months working with this company, half of my team based in Tel Aviv, the other half of my team in Redwood City, racked up over 112,000 miles in travel. And I've pushed myself beyond what I knew to be my limits, at least at that age, with respect to growing a company. And I am absolutely confident. And it's at this moment that the elder of the group removes his glasses and kind of puts them in his mouth for a second. And he just looks over at me and he says, this was fantastic, Hilmon. I appreciate the presentation. And then this smile appears, and it's this smile that I've only seen when someone who has a ton of experience is looking at someone who has very little and kind of thinking, yeah, you didn't quite get it there, right? So he says to me, it looks like you've done a great job. And I'm hoping that this is kind of where the conversation will end and we'll move on to the next person. But in this moment, my hands get clammy, my throat seizes, and he says to me, but how do you plan to scale? And I sat and I thought, well, I just gave you 10 minutes on that. I've just walked through this entire deck on how we plan to do this. I don't have anything left. So I think I reverted back to high school when I used to kind of just, paraphrase and use word sausage to get through some sort of a presentation that I hadn't really studied for. And I hear myself saying all of these words with very little meaning and very little impact. And I noticed my CEO kind of wringing his hands over in a corner and furrowing his brow. And I know at that moment that is both the end of my presentation and probably the end of my tenure in that company. And sure enough, we did not get the investment from that particular venture capital firm. And shortly thereafter, about a week later, I was pulled into the CEO's office and told that I had done a great job getting us here, but I was not the person to get us there. And even as I tell this story now, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, it still emotionally impacts me. It was one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, and I don't know if I could have prepared any better. And definitely, hindsight is 20/20, but the upshot is that this launched me on a path which has become my career over the last 25 years of clearly understanding the answers to the questions that I didn't have at the time. I wanted to know, how do you go about scaling an organization from 0 to 1 million, from 1 million to 10, from 10 to $100 million? Specifically, my realm is obviously sales management, marketing, and sales enablement. And I've spent a career putting these things together in working with startups, working with larger organizations to help them continue to scale. And I want to share with you a few things that I've learned. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, are you seeing my screen? Thumbs up? Okay, let me make this a slideshow. So these are not novel terms, but what I'm going to do is dig into these 4 concepts of strategy, systems, staff, and skills to give you an indication of how we at ClozeLoop and me in my career have gone about leveraging these as kind of the pillars that we look at for how we go about creating fast growth, how we go about doing that thing in Silicon Valley that they say moving fast and breaking things, and how we create this repeatable process that what I found is that a lot of other companies aren't doing but could. The reason this is important to me right now is because I'm actually taking everything that I've learned in Silicon Valley and moving this to the sector of small and mid-sized businesses that are not tech startups, that are not venture funded, that may not even have private equity funding, but might be bootstrapped or might be organizations that are in tighter markets that might have a deeper level of maturity and may not have disruptive technology, and overlaying these same strategies to be able to help those organizations grow. So when we think of this from the vantage point of strategy, I don't know if you've read the book Crossing the Chasm, but this person over here is my illustration of what crossing the chasm looks like. And I'll give you the synopsis on that. Basically, the thesis is that as an organization that is a startup, you're always looking at where you are today. There are people when you begin your company, when you've just received funding, or maybe it's you and a founder that are looking to be $100 million companies, but you don't get to 100 million without getting to 10. You don't get to 10 without getting to a million. You don't get to a million without selling your first $100,000. So all along the way, we're looking for who our target audience is that has a problem that we can solve or has an aspiration that we can close the gap on. And how do we meet that customer where they are today. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen in organizations that don't go quickly is they see themselves as the sprinter before they've even begun to crawl. So one thing that we do in working with organizations is we evaluate competition. Competition, this is kind of brass tacks, right? We're looking at things like direct competitors and indirect competitors. But what you'll find is that a lot of founders look at this from the lens of, who do I want to be? A direct competitor could be something like an Excel spreadsheet in reality, because it exists on everybody's laptop, or a Google Sheet, which exists on everybody's laptop. But if we're not looking at that as an alternative, then we do ourselves a disservice. We look at this entire scope of competition through the concept of a winning zone. So if you can imagine two circles with a little overlap in the middle of a Venn diagram, on one side, you've got this concept of your losing zone. This is a place where we have to be able to clearly understand that we cannot solve this problem, or we cannot close this gap for our customer. There is actually a better solution out there than us. And this takes a lot of intellectual humility to basically just say, I don't own this. Somebody else does. I may not like them. I may have even come from that company before I started mine, but they should actually benefit from working with that organization more so than they'll benefit from working with me. Then there's that middle area, which is kind of where the Venn diagram overlaps, which is called the battlefield. And a lot of folks spend their time in the battlefield talking about how we're swifter, faster, stronger, better, lighter, when all the same messages are being held by the competitor. And in that vein, it's a race to the bottom, because if it looks as though you've got feature parity, or if it looks as though you're providing the same solution, then I have no brand loyalty to you. I have no incentive to be working with you. And instead, I'm going to choose whatever the cheapest solution is for the problem that seems as though both of you solve together. So we focus very heavily with startups on understanding what that winning zone is. Where is the place that you excel? Where is the place that, both from the standpoint of market and mind share, you can own, and place where you can actually demonstrate your impact in a significant way, in a way that's credible. And then the last piece here is, once we've identified that, we want to take that message and be able to have it broadcast on every channel. And when I say every channel, these days we've got everything from emails to phone calls to talks like this, to your website, to meeting somebody at a strategy or a networking session, to any other means by which someone might come across your message. We do ourselves a disservice in startup culture when folks focus exclusively on the product. And anybody who's been in business for a long time knows that it's not just true, build it and they will come. That doesn't happen. We have to be able to align that message market fit as much as we have a product market fit. And again, keeping in mind that the strategy piece here is around who we can sell to today, not where we aspire to be, but for whom do we solve a problem today? How do we reach them with a message that sounds as though we are sitting in their office, or we have been sitting in their car with them, and we understand their pain, or we understand what it is that they're aspiring to do, and we can solve that for them in a way that's going to get them to engage in our sales process and identify value in what it is that we're selling. So that's the strategy piece. I'll give you an example here. A company that is inside of our portfolio is a company called Dado. That's D-A-D-O. They're a construction technology firm. The founders came out of Stanley Black & Decker. They were in the Stanley Black & Decker incubator. And around the time that COVID hit, their product basically works to solve for mobile on job sites. So if you can imagine construction workers on a job site with their mobile phone or an iPad in hand, that's what they do. They weren't getting a ton of traction. So COVID hits, construction begins to decline significantly. They're wondering, what are we going to do? We have to race towards a Series A. How do we pivot? They came to us and we said, basically, love the one you're with. What can we do to continue to serve this marketplace and solve a problem? We went through what their product offering afforded. And one thing that was a huge benefit that they weren't selling is that they were able to identify how to ingest disparate documents. So if you can imagine, you've got Word docs, maybe you've got PDF files, maybe you've got a blueprinting software, maybe you've got spreadsheets. All of these things exist on construction sites in different places and in folders and in notebooks. What they had an ability to do, which was a small subset of their product, is to ingest those things into a digital format so that the back office has a record of them. That is a huge piece that was very instrumental for folks who were dealing with COVID, dealing with folks not wanting to traipse in and out of the office, dealing with folks who were working remote from home. So we put that forward. In putting that forward, Stanley Black & Decker just acquired them for $67 million. The company has been in business for 4 years. Nothing to do with what their product was originally designed to do, everything to do with making a pivot, proving that out through message market fit, and understanding a timely winning zone. Let's talk a little bit about systems. So when it comes to systems in sales, a lot of folks think about selling systems. A lot of folks think about tools and technology, and we'll talk about that. But one thing that's really critical with respect to systems, as with in any organization, is to be able to create a consistent and repeatable process that allows for a feedback loop based upon those things. A lot of times, we've just got this hodgepodge of sales, right? Here's what happens in organizations that are small and mid-sized businesses. You've got either a founder or you've got a president or CEO who has come from some level of subject matter expertise and has done probably the majority of the selling. And it doesn't become scalable because what Hilmon has in his head is 25 years of experience. I also know where all the bodies are buried. I know who all the players in the industry are. And then I'm trying to bring people into my organization to scale them. And I get frustrated because they can't do what I do. And this is a huge challenge. And it becomes frustrating, not just for the owner of the company, it's frustrating for that employee who now is being berated for not being able to get things done, yet has not been provided any tools. So one thing that we really focus on here is how do we create playbooks? And the playbooks do not have to be the tablets of stone that have come down, etched into this is how you go to market. What they need to be, though, is something that is some level of control. I know there's some doctors and scientists on this Zoom today. It's just, how do we get a control from which we can evaluate through split testing, A/B testing, make some iterative, continuous improvement toward having some success. But without that control layer, we have no idea where we're going, where we've been, and what is actually impactful. So being able to pull together playbooks that help to coalesce the entire organization from product to sales to marketing strategy to ensure that we are moving in the same direction and at least have some opportunity for evaluation is critical. Second piece here, so much tech. And unfortunately, this is being recorded, so I cannot claim that I did not say this, but most of my clients are technology firms, 98% of them, and most people have an over-engineered tech stack inside of their organization. Most of us are using about 10% of all of the technology that we buy. A lot of us race towards buying tech because we hear that it's going to make us faster. It's going to create automation. It's going to create log files and reports and dashboards, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what it can often do is just amplify poor process. So one of the first things that we do is we try to decouple all of the systems, figure it out in analog, which is very surprising to 24-year-old founders, right? When I say, okay, let's get out of the laptop, let's close the laptop, let's get out a legal pad, and let's just kind of sketch out what we're really trying to achieve here. And let's prove that we can do it as individuals in the company before we go adding technology to the mix, right? So this is one piece that, again, is counterintuitive towards scale, is how do we pull all this back? Because in truth, what happens when you've got all of these systems and all of these integrations and all of this noise is you get false alarms and you start chasing your tail around these red flags that are saying, this is happening, this email isn't open, this person isn't showing up, you talked for this amount of time on a call. None of it really matters early stage. And until it does matter, let's not pull it into the organization to create more confusion. I'll tell you, there are companies that I talked to. There's an organization that I talked to about a week and a half ago. We were doing an assessment prior to bringing them on board with us. And we found that all of their meetings, and this is pulling together a leadership team of about 12 people, all of their meetings are spent looking at 7 different dashboards that are all lagging indicators from either a month or a quarter prior as to where their business is. Nobody is focused on today. So when you begin to pull these things out, it becomes a dull, like, oh, wow, okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. But for folks, this tends to be something that's somewhat novel. Fast-growing companies do this very well. And then obviously this last piece is not operating in silos, but ensuring that there is connective tissue from each individual in the organization and each divisional responsibility to ensure that there is a feedback loop, because business moves at the speed of light today, right? What you're doing today can have a significant impact on the end of your quarter, the end of your month, and an impact on other organizations, other departments inside of your organization. So we need to ensure that there are feedback loops before something goes awry. So an example here, Canvas is a pretty large client of ours. Some of you may be familiar with them. They provide learning management solutions for universities, and they had a huge last 2 years because of the asynchronous learning, the shift to asynchronous learning with colleges and universities and schools, grammar schools. Their biggest challenge internally is that they have grown through acquisition. But vis-a-vis this process, they have tons of silos of systems. They have tons of silos of reporting structure. Yet as an organization, they need to create a cohesive means of being able to develop the product, as well as a cohesive means of being able to see the impact of each product category on the overall goal. So what we did is we went in and decoupled everything. And we said, you're going to actually start talking to each other. And we're going to talk to each other about these 3 specific events and KPI that we're going to track. And in doing so, they actually, and this isn't all our deal, I think that companies like Zoom, hand sanitizer companies, and mask companies all did really well during COVID. So we can't take all the credit for their success, but they have had the last 2 years, they've had the greatest success that they've ever had. And they've folded in 2 more companies and are following a real clear playbook around how those companies come on board, how they determine scale, and what they're evaluating as an organization. So that's systems. When we think about staff, one thing really critical is identifying the definition of the role before you go out and hire for it. And this sounds completely obvious, but here's what'll happen. Sometimes orgs will say, hey, I need to get a salesperson who's a closer, and then they just put out an ad, they steal a job description from something else that might be online, cut and paste, they do Mad Libs with their own company, or what is it, search and replace with their company and something else, post it online, they get people coming through the transom, they go with the person who finger to the wind that morning they sounded pretty good, I think they'll work in the organization, bring them into the company, and then they get really frustrated that there's negligible impact on the things that they're trying to drive. So what we do here with role definition, a lot of this is ported from, if anyone's familiar with the Smart Brothers and what is it called? It'll come to me later. Top Grading, sorry. There's a great book called Top Grading. The book itself is probably about 1,500 pages long, but the gist is that we want to have a competency matrix, identify the role definition and clarity, and then set up a means of interviewing these individuals so that we can afford them the greatest opportunity to demonstrate their skills for us. So defining the roles out of the gate and defining those roles for today, as well as understanding what that role is going to look like in 18 months and 36 months. I'll give you an example here. With small businesses and startup companies, again, the aspiration toward having a CRO, toward having somebody who is going to grow the organization to that 10, 50, $100 million mark is fantastic. But just like what happened to Hilmon, that person who gets you from 0 to 1 may not be the person to get you from 50 to 100. So understanding what that role is that we're looking for today, what are the critical competencies that that individual needs to have, and then understanding where the growth is going to come from. Is that growth going to come from layering them with someone who's got significantly more experience? Does the organization have the chops for that specific role to be able to provide them with the tools and training and resources to actually grow and develop professionally as an individual? Or are we going to have to look at replacing this individual in 18 to 36 months, in which case you might want to revisit the entire equation? That competency matrix ties very clearly into the hiring rubric. So an example here is being able to ensure that we're not doing things, and this is kind of brass tacks for folks who've been in the hiring field for a long time, what we call the experiential interview, right? Instead of saying, Anastasia, so are you a detail-oriented individual? If she has any sense whatsoever, which she has plenty, she's going to say, of course I am, very detail-oriented. And then we check the box, and then we get her into the organization and we realize, wow, it's a mess. What's going on here? But shame on us, because we didn't create an experience of that instead of just asking the question. So we work with folks really significantly across the organization on developing experiences of the hiring competencies that are necessary. I'll give you a quick example of that. There's an organization called Deepgram. Deepgram just raised $56 million in their Series B. They've been around for 3 years. We met them when it was a founder who had come out of Y Combinator. If those of you who are in San Francisco might be familiar with Y Combinator, is a tech accelerator, one of the most well-known tech accelerators in the world. There was a founder, co-founder, and an engineer. And they had exhausted their network. They had exhausted their investor network, and they were thinking, gosh, I think we need to go make a hire here. We need to bring somebody on board. So luckily they came to us first, and we said, you know what, we're going to turn you all into salespeople. And we're going to see if we can create a repeatable process so that we can understand what competencies we're actually going to be looking for when we hire somebody, instead of you abdicating the role of sales to somebody else who's going to come in and you handing them the reins of spaghetti saying, make this work, run the horses. So we did this for 30 days. And kudos to them. Not every organization has the has the wherewithal or the will to do so. The founder, I should state that the founder of DeepGram is a PhD particle physicist who worked in deep matter in India for 5 years. So he's game for anything. But imagine turning that person into a salesperson, right? He was a little stiff, but he got it done. And then we proved out a process which allowed us to clearly identify what type of person we wanted to bring into the organization, how many of them we needed, and hand over, again, going back to the systems, a playbook that would make them work. And so they're doing very well. I expect an exit from them sometime shortly. And then this last piece here is around skills and skills development. So once you've brought somebody on board, and again, my domain is sales, but I think this applies across the organization. Once you've brought somebody on board, you have to plug them into a system. A lot of times what we look for is that person who's got subject matter expertise, and that person who may have a Rolodex. And I'll say this, it pains me when I talk to business owners or founders who are in a specialized marketplace. This just happened with another client of ours. I won't name the client, but they sell to bioinformaticians, and they have worked in creating a means of accelerating the process of evaluating genomic sequencing. And their concept, and this sounds like a rational and plausible thing, right? Their concept was, hey, we got to get somebody who is a PhD bioinformatician, because that's who we're selling to. We're selling to clinical diagnostics firms, and they need to be able to understand these things. It makes sense, right? The challenge is that person with a methodology would do great. That person trying to sell simply with their scientific background does pretty poorly, unfortunately. And that's what they found out in hiring 5 or 6 people. We came in and overlaid a sales methodology which couples their subject matter expertise with a clear means of being able to navigate conversations with individuals to uncover whether or not there's an opportunity here or something that we could impact inside of the organizations. And it took about 18 months to right the ship and turn it around. And there were some changes there in the organization, but being able to shore people up with the skills that they need to be successful. We're huge proponents of sales methodology. And I'll tell you this secret too. It doesn't matter what sales methodology. I've written a book called Triangle Selling on a specific sales methodology that I'm obviously a proponent of, but we support anything. What it requires is rigor, commitment and rigor. Human beings have not evolved that significantly over the last 100 years since the first sales methodology was printed, let's say. So it is not about the methodology itself. It is about the ability to maintain rigor, the ability to systematize it, the ability to evaluate, and the ability to train and hold people accountable to it. Speaking of holding people accountable, the highest value opportunity with the lowest cost to an organization with respect to sales and revenue is to develop strong frontline manager coaching. And that frontline manager might be a CEO, might be a startup founder, early days. But the ability to coach, and when we look at coaching as being understanding where someone is today, understanding where they need to go, and helping them get there, right? Not necessarily a training exercise, but just helping to maximize the performance of the individual in their specific role. When we can do that, we see a number of things happen. One, significant retention, right? If you're looking at millennials and Gen Z, they are all about, where's my development? Where's my personal development? What's my commitment to the organization? Where's the organization committed to me? And why am I staying here, right? That comes from coaching, right? The second piece is, this is the easiest way to move the needle in a short amount of time on an individual. And when we're doing this on an individual basis, we're able to level up the entire organization. Not to mention, it feels really good. CoachCRM, Anastasia mentioned that I'm a co-founder of that company. We just started in January. We did a raise, seed stage raise. We've closed our first 15 customers. It's all focused on leveraging technology to create coaching relationships inside of sales organizations. So it's not technology for technology's sake. It's technology to help coaches to better enable and empower their teams to be successful. So I'm a huge proponent of coaching culture. And then, marginal gains theory being that if we get 1% better every day, then that in aggregate accrues to a significant impact for an organization. And when we pull all of these things together, when we talk about strategy, systems, staff, and skills, and when we look at them through this lens and not in this just kind of esoteric theoretical construct, when we're able to just do these 12 things, we've seen significant growth, significant projected and predictable revenue growth in both startups that are in the technology space in Silicon Valley, which is where I make my living, as well as in companies that are outside of that space and are looking to grow inside of their own market sector. So I know I'm at my time here. This is my obnoxious series of books that I've written. They're all on Amazon. I definitely have an affliction and a lot to say. But if you hop over to Amazon, you can see, if you're interested in something that's kind of high level that talks about any of these theories, the Sales Enablement Playbook is the first book that I wrote with my co-founder, Corey Bray. And it gives a nice synopsis of this outside of the technology space of what it is that we do. And then ClozeLoop.com is where you can find me. And other than that, I'm open to questions. But now you understand my motivation and what I've spent as my life's work over the last 25 years.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hilmon. We appreciate that. Everybody give Hilmon a big round of applause from Golden Gate Breakfast Club.
Thank you for having me.
And anybody have a question, raise your hand using the reactions raised hand. Antonio White, the pitch freak, go ahead.
Incredible presentation, Hilmon. I loved it. You've taken me down memory lane with what you're doing. Appreciate you so very much here. I love your concept of the winning zone. And I'd love if you can maybe do a little bit more of a deeper dive and how that applies to your particular audience here. I also worked 30 years Silicon Valley here, focusing now very, very narrow on just pitching and specifically slide one of the Guy Kawasaki 10 slide deck. So super narrow. And that winning zone that you talked about, I love how you articulated that. It's so viable. How did you come to that conclusion about the winning zone here? And what does it mean to your particular audience today? How do you help them apply that?
So how did I come to that conclusion? You could tell by my original story that that necessity has been the mother of invention in my life. So, and what's interesting is I never can think of the right metaphor for this, but I'll just say I drink my own Kool-Aid with respect to this. I'll give you a quick story. We started off ClozeLoop as a technology company because my idea was I've been in training for I've been in the space of training for 10 years. And I've come to realize that it's very mathematical. I can understand what your challenge is and what the solution should be. And I could make these recommendations because I'm having these conversations over and over and over again. If I'm having the same conversation 100 times a day, then this is something that probably could be a great application for software technology, right? So we built this tool and we did the Silicon Valley thing. We were part of the Wharton Venture Initiative program, and we went out and we raised a little money, and we were pitching people using the Kawasaki deck, and it's interesting. Sales guys are not great at pitching. We're good at listening. We're not good talkers. Seriously, it's a very interesting thing that I learned about myself. What happened was we realized that our winning zone was our deep competence in understanding consulting, training, sales enablement, and organizations. We had zero competence in product development, engineering, and understanding user feedback and how to integrate that into the evolution of a product. And so this is just a personal example of what we sat down and did is we drew the Venn diagram. And I'm sorry, I'm not very good at there's a whiteboard on the Zoom thing, and that's just not gonna work very well for me. But if you can imagine the Venn diagram, right? We looked at this and we said, where are we losing here? We said, okay, we're losing on tech. We're losing on the fact that people just don't believe that a technology tool could be able to coach a salesperson. That needs a human being, even though they're not doing it. It needs a human being, right? We've got this middle zone, this middle area where we've got some competence around how these things happen. And we've got this winning zone, which is that we can actually stand up credibly in front of a group, whether it's leadership or whether it's salespeople, whether it's customer success and whoever it might be, and be able to move that group, shift their behavior to successful behavior and provide templates that help this to maintain rigor. So I was sitting in an office and I had this pen in my hand, and they talk a lot in Silicon Valley about pivoting, right? Moving side, move adjacent sides, going somewhere else. I said, we need to flip our construct, because our entire opportunity for where we are today as non-technologists is to be able to sell professional services. And it came from having to eat and pay a mortgage with 2 children. So once that happens, you get, you refine these things, and you get really real about the things that are important. And then we realize,
Hilmon,
gosh,
you'll love this, Hilmon. You'll love this, Hilmon. So I in my course, I teach folks about where pressure comes from, and most people apply pressure like the idea of a balloon, right? How do you
Yes.
grow a balloon? Most people in Silicon Valley try to put the balloon between their hands and squeeze it to death. Right. Right. They're applying pressure the wrong way. Right.
That's
Pressure has to come from within. Right.
It's
You
gotta
blow
come
in,
from within.
pressure from within. Right. And so
That's
you
it.
know about pressure super well.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
Plenty. Well, thank you for the question.
All right. Craig Adams, you're next.
Hilmon, thanks for everything. Really great presentation.
Pleasure.
I wrote lots of notes, and thank God we're recording this, because it was a failure. I could not keep up with you. I was like, wow, it's just rapid fire, boom, boom, boom. So
I apologize. I was looking at the clock and I wanted to get it all out.
you did. God bless you. So I'm gonna have to review, but I mean, just such good information. I just thought I'd share a couple takeaways. I like the closing. I really like that, the 1% reference. Now, I mean, Betty had mentioned that in her notes just a moment ago too, and it must be because of Buffini and Peak recently, but there's a lot of conversation in the real estate community about 1% and improving daily. And so, that's a great concept if you're speaking to, especially real estate people, we get it. And then the other thing is just an observation. There was a small blurb in the presentation where you were interrupted, and the way you handled that, I thought, was just brilliant. Really, really good skill, and when that happened, I thought, oh, this guy's a pro. He's good. So
I appreciate that, Craig. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to say one thing with respect to the 1%. That the challenge in that is being able to identify what the 1% is. Yeah. That's where we do the biggest amount of work, is being able to say, okay, so 1% sounds great theoretically. Well, what should I be focused on? This comes from the theory of marginal gains. I want to say his last name is Brailsford, who was he was the coach of the British cycling team that had never won anything. And one of the things that he did with respect to this 1% improvement, he said, we're not going to change things overnight, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to ensure that we paint our truck that carries our bicycles white, so we can identify any dust particles. I'm going to let you take your pillow when we're on the road, so you can have a better sleep at night. We're going to all of these little incremental things that afforded the opportunity for that team to win, I want to say 2 or 3 Tours de France and cycling championships thereafter. And he was, I want to say he was a Wharton or a Harvard MBA. I'll look into it and feed that back to you if you're curious, but that's where it comes from. And so these are really small things that, if we can identify them, have a huge impact on success going forward. Thanks for your feedback, Craig.
Cool. Any other questions? Betty White. Betty Taste.
Not that old. What a wonderful presentation. And to just look at you, and the smile on your face portrays more than anybody can imagine. You love what you do, and I took better notes than you did, Craig. I have a whole page.
Sounds like you have a selling opportunity.
I ran out of ink.
Back to the 1%. I belong to a group with Compass called the 6 a.m.ers. We're up every morning at 6 a.m. either listening to a motivational 3-minute blurb, or we have speakers twice a week. But the purpose at the beginning is to get a little bit better each day. You mentioned just one little thing. And what we do, it's recommended, is take care of ourselves first in the morning. You do whatever you want, but do not look at your emails. Do not start working until you take care of yourself. Be them, wussy exercises, whatever you want to do, writing affirmations. gratitudes, whatever you want to do, but take care of yourself before you start in and get sucked down the email train. And so I was extrapolating a lot of what you were saying. How does it work with a small business? And it does apply. You know, all these big words are important, but the interview thing I thought was excellent in terms of giving them situational. You used a different word, but situations when you're asking about, you know, your ability to do. Can you talk a little bit more about the interview process?
Yeah, the experiential interview. The situational works just fine. I'll give you another example. There's an organization that we were working with a number of years ago that had a very busy and I would almost say, I don't mean this in a negative way, a hyperactive sales team. I'm sorry, workspace, meaning everybody was next to each other, lots of back and forth, kind of on top of each other. And one thing that they found in looking for project managers was that people would get distracted very easily because you're standing across from somebody, they come by, they say, hello, this is when we were all in offices, right? So I said, well, you know what we need to create is an experiential interview that allows for us to determine whether or not someone has the ability to stay on task and on deadline and still be cordial to their colleagues. And so what we did, there was a glass office, much like the one that I was in, that I started with my story. There was a glass office that was a conference room. We placed the individual in that office, gave them a 15-minute task that they needed to do and complete within 15 minutes. And then we sent people in just to be nice, popping in saying, oh, Betty, hey, I heard you're interviewing for the project management role. That's awesome. What were you doing before? And just trying to distract them to see how well a candidate could say, you know, Hilmon, I would love to talk to you. I've got about 11 minutes left to finish this thing. Can I grab you for coffee maybe after the interview is complete? And I'd love to catch up with you around what my background looked like. And there was one individual who had the capability to do that. They brought the person on board and the person is still there. So that's just an example of how you look for these opportunities to create the experience of what it is that you're looking for. And this is not, I don't mean this to say that it's a ruse. You're not trying to, you know, stump the interviewer. You just want to create the greatest opportunity for them to demonstrate their acquired skills as they relate to your organization.
Interesting. And then the word, we also choose a word of the month, and my word is focus.
Love it.
And I have used this multiple times because I don't succeed. So I keep using focus, but and I have it right here on my dining room office table. So and when I get distracted, I really say to myself, okay, turn around, don't do that, stay focused. So it's a good reminder, but thank you for your words of wisdom. Much appreciated.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your feedback. Betty, I have to share one more quick thing with you. It has taken me years to come to the regular practice and understanding that I need my time every morning before I start anything. So I have taken the phone, it's out of the bedroom. It's not the first thing that I see when I roll over in the morning. I don't go anywhere near my home office. I wake up, I meditate, I do something active. Like you said, it might be woodsy exercises, whatever. Some days better than others, right? And if I don't do that, everything just falls downhill for the day. So I have created rigor, and we're all still working on focus, I think, on a regular basis. It's a practice, right?
Thank you. Susan, Rohan, you're next.
First of all, be sure to go to Park Güell as long as you're in Barcelona.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not to be missed. Second
I just
of all,
wrote it down. Thank you.
Yes, Park Güell is, his name just escaped me, and he's the one that did the magnificent church, but he did Park Güell as well. Okay. Second thing is, as I listen to you and all of you talk about the 1% of things that you can change, etc., I have always thought the don't sweat the small stuff was bad advice.
Agreed.
Because it's the small things that you're saying, that little thing, paint the van white. I think some people don't sweat the small stuff and they blow everything. So I think paying attention to the little things in life, I think that's a song by Wayne Newton or someone, but it's the little things in life that count. And I really love the fact about putting the person in the situation. And by the way, what Betty said is true. From the how to work a room person, you have to thank your parents, because you have the one trait that people find approachable. You have a natural smile.
Oh, thank you.
And that makes things so interesting for the people, that makes you approachable. But I would disagree with you when you said about, well, we don't speak well. Didn't you all think he did a great job? Even though, you are phenomenal.
Thank you.
I just want you to know that. And as a former teacher, I'm giving you an A+.
Oh, thank you, Susan. You may be the first teacher that ever did that.
Hey, you know what? The fact that I grade people on everything makes me the least attractive person to be around.
Susan,
And
That's true. We
Tony,
love you, Susan. We love you, Susan.
Can I share one thing about the little things? When we're coaching teams, one of the other reasons why we underscore this 1% and the little things, it's because that's all we can really control in any given moment. And if you feel as though you've got some level of control, then that incrementally builds towards, mammoth goals, rather than saying, gosh, this thing, I'm so far away from where it is that I'm trying to go and what it is that I want to do. That's really defeating. Instead of saying, here's what's in front of me this morning. Let's just go knock that out. It's a whole lot easier.
And I don't know if you've heard of it, but he's BJ Fogg out of Stanford has a book, and he does a clubhouse called Tiny Habits.
Yes.
So if you're interested, it's a pretty interesting concept, and he every so often is on Clubhouse and does a room that you could jump into.
BJ Fogg has great whiteboard models that I use all the time. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Raise your hand physically or jump up and down. Antonio, and then Claudette.
I'll go to Claudette first because I already had a question. So go to Claudette first.
Claudette, unmute there.
Mine is not a question. I wanted to tell you how much I appreciated your presentation, because I'm now out of Silicon Valley, but I spent my entire career in startups. And as you were going through, I was saying, yep, nailed it there. Yep, nailed it there. You were spot on all the way. I was in startups that made it, and I was in startups that didn't. And everything you said was spot on. And I'm going to go, I have actually 6 pages of notes, and I'm going to go back through them and actually think about each startup. But, going through so fast, I only spotted about 4 or 5 of them, but you were spot on. You exactly identified what will make a successful startup versus not.
Thank you so much, Claudette. I appreciate the feedback.
So the thing I could talk to you for hours. I have a daily Clubhouse call at 10 a.m. Pacific in the Pitch Freaks Club, and it's called the Pitch Freaks 10-Second Pitch Challenge.
Okay.
And the objective is to get people to consolidate their message, specifically their slide 1 for an investor deck, into 10 seconds, 30 words or less.
Wow.
And only in the past a month, I've had probably 1,000+ people go through this process, and only 2 have been able to pass. So it has to be 10 seconds, and it has to engage investors instantly. One of the things that came up that I think you'll appreciate is this pattern that the smarter, more educated people are, the more they focus on functional language, feature language, rather than specifically benefits, right? And benefits as they apply to the person with whom they are presenting, right? And so the big issue that folks are facing predominantly, the pattern is people are pitching with their product hat on,
Yes.
rather than their investor hat or their customer hat, right? And so it's such a pervasive problem that just solving that one problem, I think, could make founders and startups far more successful faster by just making that one shift. So you talk about making a 1% shift, every day. Just the idea of getting people to take their product hat off and put their investor or customer hat on when they're making a presentation, putting themselves in the person's shoes with whom they are pitching or whom they're presenting, is one thing. And then the second thing that you did, which was really interesting to me, is we had this concept of customer service for our customers and how important that is to create a brand experience. But you're taking it to a whole new level, the idea of customer service for your sales team, for
Yes.
your internal team, meaning how do you make your people more effective, is such a vital part of that too. So not only should you have customer service for your customers, but a customer service like experience to benefit your actual employees, to make sure that they are as successful and feel cared for and important as well. So thank you for a great presentation today. And by the way, if you ever want to be on that call, you have an open invitation here. You hop on anytime. I'll bring up on stage to have a conversation. Would love to have you on that
Well,
time.
I got to do the 10 seconds too. Otherwise, I'm not playing along. So let me get back to the United States, and I'll take you up on that. One quick thing that I have to tell you, an exercise that moves mountains for both marketing teams and sales teams that we do out of the gate after we've identified the features and benefits that fall into the winning zone, right? We will say, okay, and they can go through their website, they can go through their product marketing literature, whatever they'd like to. We'll then say, okay, and keep in mind also that I work almost exclusively business to business. I don't do a lot of B2C work with clients. We'll say, okay, here's the feature, here's the benefit. What problem would I have to have today to care? And that's where the mind finally shifts towards a conversation that you could have with a prospect or a customer that's relevant and engaging, versus you just saying how you're swifter, faster, stronger, lighter, better, the most fantastic thing that's ever occurred. So I deeply appreciate what you're saying there. It's a challenge, and once people do it, it unlocks great conversations.
The thing that tied to that one that I love is that I see with a lot of engineers and really smart folks, they have always 5 or 3 things that they can do, or 5 things to do. I can tell you, look, if you have time for one person, you have time for one button, one benefit for one person. So bet the farm on that one thing, yes, and deliver on that, and you're going to get much better results.
Agreed.
For folks.
Agreed. I love it.
Thank you so much, Hilmon. You're welcome to.
Thank you.